Hello everyone and welcome to Standardization Benefiting Career Development. It's great that you've joined us this morning. Thank you for choosing to be with us on this breakout session. This is about standardization benefiting career development, and I'd like to hand over to Navdeep, who's a good friend of mine with Kat.
Thank you very much, Alan. Okay, welcome everyone. Here is the agenda for today's session. Formal presentation will take around 20 minutes and then we will be answering your questions. Feel free to ask questions anytime during the presentation using Q&A facility of our Zoom. So we are here to share our experience on how our career has developed since getting involved in standardization, and in an attempt to engage as many new standard makers as possible. Some of the schemes which BSI offers are focused on young professionals, so I will especially encourage our young professionals to ask questions. Before getting engaged in standards making, let's answer one basic question: that why do we need standards? International Standard Organization was founded with the idea of answering a fundamental question: that what's the best way of doing this? That particular question developed standards. And as we all know, standards are heavily used in manufacturing industries. However, I had been using standards without my knowledge in my experience in non-manufacturing environment. For example, when I was in Jaguar Land Rover, we had vehicle test procedures, and those procedures are based on IEC standards. Even technical documents at our workplaces use IEC standard for creating templates. Now I will share my involvement in standards and what we have learned so far before I hand over to the rest of the panel to share their experience. I'm a group leader for Machine Control and Protection Work Group for UK's own nuclear fusion experiment machine called MAST Upgrade. It's named Upgrade because, as you can see, it's going through major upgrades. You can see in the background, hopefully. And we are in the final commissioning phase. We are a government organization named UK Atomic Energy Authority, and we are based in Culham Science Centre in Oxfordshire. I'm a standard maker for measurement and control devices, which in BSI standardization world known as GEL 65, and in IEC world it's known as TC 65 as the committee. I represent Institute of Measurement and Control at BSI committee, and my involvement in standards making is via providing comments, emails, formal meetings. Last year I attended 2 meetings in Europe, 1 web conference and 3 meetings in London. We are trying to spread the meetings across other parts of UK other than London. And my introduction into standards was via this same conference, by the Standards Conference in April 2017. That's when I met Alan first, and he informed me of a BSI Young Professional Program. I was one of 4 who attended IEC General Meeting at Vladivostok, Russia. This was a platform where around 200 young professionals from around 70 countries experienced standards making process for 3 days and shared their ideas with IEC Executive Committee. It was a wonderful experience that helped me to build confidence. I will share more on this in the later stage in the presentation. And my technical experience lies in control instrumentation from different industries. I've worked in power stations, automation, automotive, and now working in fusion research environment. I've learned different things working in my career, and standards making has given me the platform to utilize my knowledge and experience from those industries. I'll share an example. Sensors and the chart recorders used in power stations are not commonly used in automotive test lab. I can still make use of my experience while providing comments for making a standard. I have also developed my soft skills and cultural awareness while working with other committee members from all around the world. It's provided me an exposure to an environment beyond my normal working environment. And by helping our wider engineering community, I definitely get a level of satisfaction and accomplishment, which drives me further to learn more and participate more. In addition to organizational development, which I will go through later in the presentation, my development helps me perform better, making my company to grow, and it also provides me exposure and enhances the reputation, which has helped me in my performance review, which again makes me happy. And as we all say, happy mind is a healthy mind. That's all from me for now. I will come back to summarize the benefits, but now I will hand over to Kat and Alan to share their experiences. Kat, would you like to begin, please?
Wonderful. Thank you, Nev. Right, so a little bit about me and my background. As mentioned, I am Kat Rosier, an electrical and electronic design engineer at Veolia Nuclear Solutions. I've had a varied career as a design engineer, designing custom machinery across a large variety of sectors. This is including heavily regulated industries such as medical, food, and nuclear. I have always been involved with the machine's entire life cycle, including concept design, manufacture, trials, installation, commissioning, factory acceptance, testing, servicing, and finally, decommissioning. Because of this, I have always used standards from many perspectives, from sourcing components to design features, testing, updating, and compliance. I was thrilled to be able to get the chance to represent the UK and the BSI at the IEC's Young Professional Programme in 2018 at the IEC's general meeting in Busan, South Korea. It was, all expenses paid, fantastic experience. I learned so much from it, and I can't recommend it enough. It was great to have it to break into the world of standards, which, to quite a few folk, when you're just starting out, it seems, so difficult to understand. And I met so many fantastic people there. To be in one room and have a discussion with engineers, scientists, and academics from all across the world and share our experiences and learn together was, I think, a fairly unique thing. The program helped me to take the next steps in my career and get involved with the committees AMT 10, GEL 3, NC 9, SEG 10 and SEG 11 of the IEC. I've also done a lot with other diversity and educational panels and projects. Within my current role of designing robots that decommission nuclear power plants and for fusion plants, I use the soft skills I developed through the DSI daily and help others in my team and within the wider company feel more comfortable with understanding and using standards. It's great to be able to bring that expertise back into your company so that, somebody that is looking at a standard for the first time can easily digest it. Wonderful. Okay, so in terms of bringing back that expertise, here are some of my top tips for using standards for beginners. So number one is understanding the scope. Every standard has a scope at the start. This is free to view on the BSI website, and it tells you what is in a standard and what is not in a standard, so what is actually exempt. And you can get quite a bit through a standard only to realize that, because your wheelbarrow has 2 wheels as opposed to 1, it is actually exempt from the standard. And tip number 2, you get a type of thing when a standard is updated and it's a track changed or track changes version. These are like red line versions of standards. It shows you exactly what has changed and what it was previously, and it is fantastic because certain standards are, as I'm sure some of you will know, epically long, and trying to sift through 200 or more pages and work out that someone's changed where a comma lies in a paragraph is actually quite difficult. So it's a really, really helpful thing to actually be able to work out what has changed in the standard. And number 3 is learning how to read standard titles. So we've got 2 examples here, which are very, very well-known standards. So effectively, the first one, BSEN IEC 60204-1 2018. So effectively, that would have been, came out in 2018. It's part 1 of 60204, which is the actual code for the standard. It was written by the IEC and it is an international standard. EN, that effectively links into, it's incorporated within the European thing, and BS, so it's provided by British standards. So number 2, comparatively, is BS 7671 2018, released in 2018, and that standard is only national. It only really exists within the UK. Anyone who is listening may know the other name for that standard because it is a very famous one, which is the 18th edition. And on point number 4, on the BSI shop website, on a standards page under product details, you will find the committee who effectively is responsible for that, and you can actually then link it to their page, and there is a join now button. So if a standard is as I'm sure some of you will know if a standard is an interesting topic to yourselves, you can get involved and help change its future. Right, that's it for me. I'll just pass back to my colleague Al.
Thank you, Kat. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself now, so you can get a feel for how I've ended up doing this thing today from where I started out. At the moment, I'm a senior compliance and approvals manager working at Dyson. Part of my role is to make sure that products that we sell are not kept off the markets in the countries that we sell in, maybe about 90 to 100 countries by standards and regulations. And probably about nearly 10 years ago now, I started off in the kind of defense industry, aerospace and defense, working with simulator control products to train pilots in how to fly aeroplanes. And I started off there as a test engineer, seeing the problems that we picked up through test, through returns coming into base. And it was at that point that I began to think about how we can prevent those problems. And one of the routes that we started looking at was how to apply standards and how to apply that common sense approach that standards kind of embodied for us in that setting. I then moved into oil and gas, working in hazardous areas where if your product doesn't meet the approval, it's going to cause a large explosion and possibly a severe loss of life. It had some interesting test days that we did, which was quite exciting. And from that, I learned more about a global point of view of standards and how that applies in the global marketplace, and how access through standards to marketplaces was key. But that was my real first introduction to the world of standards, where a standard was being developed that we came across that could have had a large impact on the industry and on the products that we were making. So through our trade association, Gambika, I joined a technical committee that was involved with the development of this standard, and we developed it in a way that benefited industry and benefited the companies that made that sort of product. So from that point, I, like Nav and Kat, was fortunate, pleased to be nominated as an IEC Young Professional for the UK. And I went to Frankfurt, was exposed to the development process, thrown right into the heart of the IEC and how things work there. It was a little bit bewildering, but I came away with lots of really helpful people that I knew from there that could help explain what was going on in the world of standards. And now today I am kind of fairly involved with the UK standards development, strategy setting, and also I'm chair of the Young Professionals Advisory Panel, which is just about being set up to help BSI and advise BSI on how we can get easier access into standards development. So next slide, please, Nav. What have I learned so far? I think I'd like to share that with you. I think you can get involved. Before I moved into the oil and gas sector, I didn't think it was easy to get involved with standards. I thought it was the black box that people just wrote standards that seemed to get in the way of product development. I now know that that's not true. I think that, coming on to the second point there, you're valuable as a person, and as the knowledge and experience you have of where you work and the industry you work in is really valuable to the standards development process. I used to think that you had to have the right qualifications, the right technical expertise, the right letters after your name to be involved with standards development, but that's just not true. You will know things that others don't about how a standard can affect what you do, and that's really important. And finally, maybe slightly more controversial, or maybe not, depending on whether you are in the world of standards or not, standards world is impenetrable. maybe this is one that's quite good to have a Q&A on, but I think that standards world can seem quite bewildering and you don't really know which way is up and you're learning a new language. So next slide, Kat. Sorry, Nav. This is kind of an illustrative example. So this is my work within standards world. I can imagine that means very little to anybody. It means very little, I should imagine, to most people within the world of standards. But at least they know where to kind of look at these numbers and letters and slashes and kind of work out what that means. Next slide, please, Nav. So in the real world, this is what that means. I'm involved with the safety of household appliances, particularly how robots are designed to be safe, how appliances can be powered, looking at DC power, power supplies, all sorts of things about how you get power into an appliance. Looking at surface temperatures and how hot can something get before it could be a problem of safety. The difference between having a toaster and having something like a blender. You know, what's acceptable in terms of risk there. There's a very emerging area in artificial intelligence, which is fascinating to be involved in. So I'm working in that area as well. And standards are only really very helpful if you use them to test something or show compliance against a standard. And that's conformity assessment. And I'm involved with the management of conformity assessment schemes for electrical equipment in the UK, which is the flip side to developing standards. It's how you test standards. And then finally, and probably the thing that I enjoy the most, is what's called a digital transformation of standards. So within the IEC, at an international level, and also at a UK national body level, I really like to think about how things could be done in an easier way and in a way that allows people to participate within standards more easily. So on the flip side of that, reversing that round, you could say it's looking at what are the barriers that people are experienced to being able to participate in standards and how can we address those. Thanks, Nav. I think it's back to you.
Thank you, Alan and Kat, for sharing your experience. I think our next year's standards conference topic could be is standards world is impenetrable or not. So that might be one topic we can pick on. But let's start with the summarizing the benefits. Let's start with the organizational benefit. Well, you will help your organization to gain an insight into and an influence over the standards that affect their business. So it definitely sounds like a win-win situation. Personally, you will develop your skills in communications and decision making, as well as get an extra opportunity to focus on the subject that you are interested in. Effectively, this experience will give you the skills to handle situations at work better, and you can add BSI logo on your signature or your business cards. For networking, we have already shared our experience from BSI's Young Professional Program. I would like to add that this is an extraordinary opportunity to share your ideas across board and help make the difference while traveling around the world with expenses paid by the BSI. I think we said enough. I'll share more details in the next slide. Also, as part of the committee member, you get access to other BSI panels. For example, I'm a member of Young Professional Advisory Panel, like Alan has mentioned, and you get to build a network by participating in other BSI events and conferences like this. I have provided the link on this slide. You'll meet other committee members from different countries, institutes, organizations, or associations, which will definitely broaden your network. I represent Institute of Measurement and Control and have a very strong network whom I can help or even seek advice when I need to. Another way of developing your career is by attending a variety of soft skills training courses that BSI offers to its committee members at no cost. Some of the trainings on offer are cultural awareness, influencing and persuading skills, Now, my previous employer had to outsource these trainings, which may be the case for some self-employed people. But as a committee member, you have got now the free access to this. You will be able to look into the complete list using the link on this slide. Also, I've attended some webinars on standards, which are not directly linked to my work, but I was interested in knowing more of. You may have heard David Bell in the morning in the opening session about webinars on the recent situations. These definitely contribute to the CPD. Now, many of you will be aware of United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Last year's standard conference was actually focused on these goals because standards are the key to unlock these goals. So you will get a sense of accomplishment by participating in standards making. That's all from us. I provided some useful links in the next slide. First link will take you to BSI's Young Professional page, where you can learn more on the offer and watch videos shared by young professionals from previous years. Just a reminder that this year's young professional will have the opportunity to attend IEC General Meeting at Geneva from 9th to 11th of November. It's all expenses paid trip and applications are open till 31st of May 2020. Next two links will explore benefits to you and your organization and how you can get involved with standard making. Feel free to contact BSI or anyone of us to get involved. Well, thank you very much for listening. We will answer your questions now.
We've got a question here from Dan. I like this question. I'm not entirely sure with the approach to engineering standards and cutting ours down or thinking differently, but I think maybe what you're asking is how are standards changing and how can you be involved possibly. There are opportunities to be involved with a committee. You have to find a nominating organisation. So a trade association is a typical route in, particularly within the water industry. I know there are some around. And if you're just looking to expand knowledge on standards in other industries too, there are kind of forums like this that BSI run, so look out for their events. And by all means, get in touch with BSI and the standards makers or any of our speakers today. Yeah, thanks very much. I think there's another question here for Kat.
Oh, yes, sorry. Right. So, yes, we've got a question here, which is a good one. Do you find that your passion for and understanding of standards is shared by colleagues, or that you have been able to obtain their involvement because of your enthusiasm? I think this is an absolutely great question. Varied, I would say, varied, because yes, again, within my organisation, especially with young graduates, like design engineers, I you know, try and get them to feel a bit more comfortable. And you can imagine that the last thing that you know, shiny new graduate wants to do is read a 200-page document or maybe multiple standards and digest them. They just want to go off and play with spanners. So yes, no, I get varied. There's a lot of people that do, you know, they kind of like initially they're like, oh God, you know, it's a necessary evil. But then I've also actually had a lot of people that have kind of gone, oh, that they're a lot easier to use than I thought. And I think that I speak for all of us in terms of I've encouraged people from my company to go onto the scheme and get involved. And I know that like there's and this is both young and the older generation as well. I mean, because my boss, the head of the electrical group for my company, he's been using nuclear standards for, you know, decades, and it was fascinated with the idea of the fact of involvement, because he was sort of saying that, you know, like, oh, I thought it was this black box that no one, you know, could access, and then suddenly, you know, one of my team is actually, you know, you're in. So and there's a lot of people that are genuinely, it's like, well, how does it work, you know, they're like, well, what are the committees like, and X, Y, and Z, and so I have actually seen a lot of interest from that perspective. But it is a bit of a vary. I think there's a, you know, you just have to hack away at people slowly.
I can take the next question, which is from Libby Collins. The question is, how did you originally hear about how standards could be of use? I've worked in power stations. That's how I started my career. And when in the power station, when we procure equipment, procure sensors. So specifications writing, and that's where I got involved in. I looked into standards. Okay, these equipment, they conform to this standard, and that's how actually I got into aware of what standards are useful for me. Then working more into senior roles, looking more into the functional safety side, I got more involved into the, okay, what standards do I need to comply or need to follow for the machine or for the different kind of machines, because there was a big project and there was a big change in some standards. So that's how I originally heard about standards, when I was writing specifications for the equipment in a power station. Thank you. There's a question for Kat and L that how, I've already explained that how did I get into young professional. There was my mentor sitting there.
But it's an interesting one, because we all know each other through the Young Professionals program, and we've all been to different events that have been organised by the IEC. I met Nav talking about my experiences in Frankfurt at a BSI event to promote the Young Professionals program, and then I was fortunate enough to be with Nav in Vladivostok, which is a highlight in itself, really. I don't think I would ever have thought of going to Vladivostok as a something to do in my life, but it was a fantastic place to go and experience. We saw Russian ballet, which was absolutely, again, another thing that I'd never thought I'd see. And I think there are many highlights, but for me, those highlights all revolve around the people that I met and the way in which, as a young professional, the IEC was really trying to promote and help train us to really be the next people that drive the IEC forwards. So it was a very encouraging process and experience, and I took a great deal of confidence from it into my kind of work setting as well. So not one particular experience I'd say was a highlight, but having been to a couple now, as a leader and as a participant, I think it is just the fact that there are so many people in the room that are of a similar age, working in similar areas, but with such vast different experiences for you to learn from. So that's what I would say. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Kat or Nav.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, no, I would very much so kind of agree with your experience. Yeah, in Busan in Korea, you see a huge amount of cultural things, because you get a lot of with the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony, they do a lot of cultural things, and kind of experience Korea and whatnot. There's which was fantastic, because I'd never been to Korea before. So it was a really, really fun experience, and it's definitely somewhere I would go back to. Whereas beforehand, I was like, wasn't quite so sure. But it was, in terms of the people that you could actually be in a room with, yeah, it was fantastic, because it's just even completely out of your industry. I could speak to people from Kenya who worked on solar panels, whilst also at the same time talking to someone who worked for the equivalent of the national grid in Australia, and it was like, wow, okay. That's that's absolutely fantastic, and then you're all talking about the same standards, but from a completely different perspective, and it's a fascinating thing to be able to kind of actually get that experience. And it's very quick paced in terms of like, all right, now you can do a presentation, now you chair a mock committee and X, Y, and Z, and you just get so many things that can come to you, and it's fantastic. And that's it for me on that question.
Nav, have you got anything to add?
It was a wonderful experience. I think how to get to know was definitely with attending the conference that we had in I think it was in London. I can't remember exactly the place, but that's how I come to know there's a Young program. I looked more into it, and the best thing happened was I could actually put a face to the scheme. There was you. I heard about the scheme. But then when I met you, that's when it comes to me that, okay, there is someone has been there, they are sharing their experience, so it is definitely a good opportunity, and there is a good chance, because it says you had there was 3 people from UK which were nominated by BSI and the panel. So I said, okay, and then you encouraged me. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience applying for it, getting the presentation ready, and being there for 3 days, attending all the management board meetings, and 2 days for all the social events that was on offer. No, that was a brilliant experience. I'll definitely recommend to everyone, young professional, have a look on the links, and I think definitely apply for this.
Yeah, you can find the selection process for this year through those links. That'd be the easiest way to find out how to apply. In terms of what it was like, it involves a little bit of effort in terms of writing about your experience with using standards, what that looks like, and maybe there's sometimes a couple of questions about how you think standards can affect your professional life, basically. The links to those presentations will be shared after the event as well. But if you look on the BSI website, there's also links to the Young Professional Programme there. Thanks, Joanna. That was a really good question.
Shall I take the next one? It's a question from Paul Robbins. Standards need to be established by leading experts in their field. How do BSI manage this process? If you look into standards makers or the initiative standard maker, how we engage standard makers, what we need is knowledge and experience in those fields. The expertise, yes, you will develop your expertise while you're working in the field, but then what I have experienced is that as part of GEL 65, we have many manufacturers in the committee, and also we have the associations. So if I'm not sure on something, for example, if I need more information from the manufacturers, then I do go to those associations to get the inside of it. But when I sit on the committees, the international committees, you will see there are manufacturers. So you need to have the voice of manufacturers and the users on the same committee, and definitely manufacturers will have the expertise in the field, but the users will have the expertise in actually using them or the application. So that's why we need a right mix of expertise, knowledge, and experience on those committees. Thank you.
Right, so I'm going to take the next question, which is from Dave. Do you not find that in some cases that the graduates have been taught against out-of-date standards and have to be completely re-educated? This is certainly very common in the steel reinforcement sector. I would actually go one further than that. I'm not sure if anyone else has had this experience, but especially making custom machinery, I've quite often found that somebody specifies that they want a piece of machinery designed to an out-of-date standard, and you have to very politely email them and say, no, they up-issued it, a year ago. So yes, no, it is definitely a thing, because people just assume that standards are standard and never goes out of date, and it is one of the things that I do say to people is kind of like, look it up on the BSI website and it will tell you if it's been reissued or if it's up for a reissue as well, because that can be one of the important things if so especially if you're looking at more longer term projects. I mean, like I work in, well, myself and Nav both work in the nuclear industry, and nothing happens very quickly in the nuclear industry. So if you're on a project which is 4, 5, even 10, or you look at say things like ITER in the south of France and Cadarache, I mean, you're talking decades, and it's the fact of like, you need to be aware that the standard that you start with may actually have changed and gone through a revision, or maybe 2, by the time that you finish your project. And so you can't take one thing as the fact of like, no, and so it is important to say to people, check the revisions, and know that it will be updated in the next year, and because these things are easily available online, and getting graduates to actually think about that. And it's yes, it's a bit of a trial, but yes, I do have to reinforce that. So yeah, that's me on that front. I'll pass you over to the next question.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here that I'd like to answer. So from Julia True, is the Young Professional Programme only related to IEC, or is there something similar for ISO and SEN standards for maybe construction products? So I'm aware that ISO have a similar scheme to the IEC in terms of young professionals. I don't know the details of those yet, but I think if you were to email BSI or get in touch with one of us, then I'm sure we can put you in touch with somebody that does know the answer to that. As for SEN and SENELEC, they don't have a program at the moment. There are some discussions happening amongst young professionals that attended the IEC last year, the Young Professionals Programme, that are from European countries and are interested in trying to explain the differences with how European standards work with relation to ISO and IEC. So that is hopefully answering your question, Julia. And what's the cut-off age for the Young Professional Programme? Well, it's quite an interesting question, being typically the standards world has a fairly older average age, I think, to most other places. So what is a young professional what is a young professional in terms of the standards world? We say in the UK that we limit applicants, I think, or is it the IEC? I don't remember. But I think 35 is about the cut-off age for the young professional programme. But if you find that you're on the wrong side of that, then there are other ways in which we can help navigate standards well for you, Emma. So please do get in touch.
Can I add a little bit on this, Alan? A bit more specific, because I remember this. You need to be 35 on 30th of June of the day. And I was young by 2 days, just to let you know, when I applied for this position, for this role, and when I was selected. So 30th of June, you have to be under 35 or under. Okay, I'll take the next question. It says, are you currently technical experts or conveners? It's by Peter Kennelly, sorry. Are you currently technical experts or conveners on your respective committees? With that role in mind, it's worth mentioning that free training is possible from BSI, for example, dealing with conflict, ethics for engineers. Yes, you're right, Peter. I have provided the link on the slide where I summarize the benefits. But yes, to deal with the situations, you do get to have to attend all the trainings. You get to offer all the trainings free of cost as a committee member. They are about the cultural awareness, because you deal with different, you deal with experts from globally. I was in a web conference session last month, and we had experts from China, we had from Japan, we had from Europe, America. I mean, the time was critical, that at some places it was 4 o'clock and at some places it was in the midday. But yes, it tells you about how to deal with, how other people deal with the situation, and how you can actually handle those situations. But so far my experience has been great, very, very collaborative, very cooperative. But yes, these trainings, like I said before, not only helps you while you're actually making standards, but also when you're at work. I did share one thing, that standards are made on consensus basis, and at my work I had some situations where I couldn't get into the majority, so I used my scale of consensus to actually come to a conclusion. So yes, these training programs, definitely go through the link which is offered to the committee members, and you can utilize in your committee participation, or even at your work. Okay. Yep. So Ellen, do you want to take this question on how long the program lasts and funding?
Yeah. So the Young Professionals Programme for the IEC is funded by a number of trade associations. So they, in addition to, I think, the IET and BSI, will fund travel expenses of you getting to the programme and as well as being there. It used to be for 3 days in the location where the IEC general meeting is being held. I think that may have now extended to a possible 5 days for the actual program face to face, and then it kind of lasts for a year after that. So there will be ideas working to work on that come out of that workshop that the leaders from the workshop will keep you in touch with. It's all geared to increasing the engagement with your national body, your national committees, as well as the international committees. So if you are selected, then it's funded by those trade associations, BSI and the IET, and yeah, it's a really good opportunity. Okay, there's one.
Sorry, just to add on to that, Alan, just because I can think of a very good thing as well, as with the YP program. Yeah, so it's I believe it's about a week now, but is it for the next 2 years you're allowed to shadow things? You'll probably know more information on that than I do.
Yeah, so once you've been on the Young Professionals program, you can ask to be added to a technical committee within BSI in your area of interest. So that's an opportunity. I've stretched that out for a number of years. I think it just depends on how you participate in those sessions. We've got one last question here from Paul. Metaphorically speaking, we can, like the goldfish, not be aware of changes in context. How do the BSI get out of the water to facilitate change? This is a very interesting question. I think it's really about who is involved with the standards development process. BSI really provides the forum for industry organisations to get together. So that is probably how BSI gets out of, is aware of the changes in the context, which is why participation of people within industry and with their experiences is so important. So thanks for that question, Paul. I think we're coming up to the end of this session. I would really encourage you to keep in touch on this. If you're interested in standards making, standards development, and please keep in touch with us. And please enjoy the main conference, which will be starting soon. Thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this session.